Hello and welcome to an introduction to the Houdini navigation and creating nodes and basically basic stuff. This is Dan Triplett, and I wanted to just get you in a quick start on how to navigate through Houdini and do a few little things so you can get going in any other tutorials. So before I go over anything, I just want to show you that I have a dark background, and to get the dark background, you just need to be over your viewport, hit D on your keyboard, and after you've done that, you go to background right here in this tab, and then we'll go ahead and change it from, it's usually starts off like this, light, and then you just change it to dark, and then save as default. You can keep it at light if you want, but I like to work with the dark background. It's just my preference. So let's get on to the interface. So first off, this is obviously the Houdini interface. If you look along the top, you'll see there's like this build button right here, and they have different builds. I have a couple of my own, Dan, and then Dan 2, and then I made one for rigging. And so there's, you could set it up different ways. We'll go into how to set stuff up. But I just wanted to go over the navigation first. So everything's viewport specific. So if you are over here and you do a keystroke, it's going to be different than what a keystroke, how a keystroke works if you're over here or over here. The first thing that I like to do actually is I'm going to set this up and then show you the navigation. I pop this up like this, and then when I make any kind of nodes, I hit P on my keyboard, and you'll get your dialog box that shows the properties of that node right over here instead of having it here. So normally if I'm right clicking and I'm just going to type in geo. So most of the things you're going to do is going to be, a lot of stuff's going to be inside of a geo node. And if you do something like this, you see the properties up here, like it has its translate, rotate, scale, pivot, and then there's a few other things. And then of course there's render stuff, and I have redshift as well, so I have an extra tab there that you won't see if you're not using redshift. But what I do is I collapse this, and then I hit P on my keyboard, like I said, and then the properties come up here. What that allows me to do is, a lot of times you actually don't need that much viewport space, and you want to see like your nodes so you can grab nodes really fast. This isn't the only way to set up Houdini, of course. I mean, I've seen people who do like quad sections, and they have them like all linked to different areas so they can jump around their scene, especially if you have like a really big scene. Or big node graph, they have that. But for me, especially for getting started off, I like this because I like to be able to see my nodes easily and select them easily. One thing I always do too is that if you ever go through any of my tutorials, you'll see that I have colors. So I just hit C on my keyboard, and what I'll usually do is I'll usually color my nodes, and because I teach Houdini, so I'll go ahead and like do stuff like this, and add in something like this is a container for SOPs. And then you say, what's SOPs? Okay, well, SOPs is surface operators. Basically, like your main geo stuff is done in SOPs, but even inside of here, you can do simulation stuff. Usually you're jumping into another context. It's called DOPS. However, side effects is changing that stuff. So some of the stuff now is the DOPS is dynamic operators. That's like for simulations. Anyway, we're not going to get into the woods right now on that one, or the weeds, I should say. And so anyway, just so you know, like this container is basically, if you double click it or hit I, so I'll hit I, you go, oh, is that not working now? Well, double click it, you'll go into it. U takes you out, or double click to get in, and you could just hit back to the object level up here. So I thought I was supposed to take you in, but maybe, oh, there it worked that time. I don't know, it didn't work the first time I tried it. But I is like for in, and U is for like up, so it takes you up a level. Just think of this like a folder or a directory. That's really all it is, or a container, if you will. You're just going to contain certain things in here. And Houdini is really great for organization stuff, because you kind of have to be organized, because you're going to have a lot of nodes, and you kind of need to know what you're doing or be able to navigate it, especially if you are going to teach it or work with other people. You really want to be able to do that. Okay, so navigation. If you work with Maya, Blender, any of those things. They have all, some of our different navigation, but Houdini is very similar to Maya. So if you hold Alt and left click, you can rotate. If you hold Alt and right click, you can zoom in and out. And if you hold Alt and middle mouse button, you can pan. That's the main stuff that I use in here. You can roll your middle mouse and go in and out. I think it's exactly the same in Maya. So if you're familiar with Maya, you're going to be familiar with Houdini's navigation. So it's not really that hard. Let's just go through. Obviously, you have different menus up here, like your save stuff and setting a new project and, edit. Honestly, a lot of these I don't end up using too much. I do use the file menu. Sometimes I'm using some of these other ones to pull up things, but more often than not, I don't need to get into these menus too much. One thing you should do, obviously, is like if you start a file, and I could say like save as, you can see right now I'm set to saving into a rigging file. That's where I'm doing some rigging. I'm doing a rigging class in Houdini because I've rigged in other programs, but not Houdini. So I have my stuff set up in here right now. And so since I don't have anything saved out, I could save this out. I'll go ahead and oops, I just can't seem to get that right there. That's what it keeps like jumping. Not sure why. So we'll just clear this out and just say intro interface or something like that, interface, and save it. Now, if I go back and say save as, you're going to see that it actually saved it as a HIPNC, which is a non-commercial. And you'll see these different ones, like this is limited commercial. That's if you get the independent or the indie version of Houdini, which is really good. And then the HIP is the full version. So if you have actual, like if you paid for Houdini FX, the full version, that's that. You won't be able to open a HIP in here, I don't believe, I don't believe you can open a HIP and see non-commercial in you might be able, no, I don't think so actually, now that I think about it. I haven't played with that, but I think they make it very specific because I have had the limited commercial. I've done some jobs in Houdini, and I can't open my non-commercial in the limited commercial. So anyway, just want to set that up and let you know that. One of the things you could do here then, if I've saved the file out, and then I want to go ahead and say new project, and I can go ahead and say like rigging. Actually, I'm going to, well, yeah, we'll say rigging like that, okay? And then it wants to take you, it says $home. This is like an expression, and Houdini it's going to tell it to go to like a default place where Houdini can save projects off to. But we don't want that. We want to set it ourselves. And so what I'll do is I will actually just click on this, and then I'll find the location where I want this. This step is actually really important because you want to make sure that that when you're doing your work, that you can take your work to another computer and work, and that means we're making like relative paths versus absolute paths. Absolute path would be like it's on my specific drive or something, but now I can make a relative path. It's going to make all of these different folders, and they're going to be named all this, and you could add custom folders in if you want. Stuff like that, and I'm just going to use the default. It should save off this rigging project name in my rigging folder, so I hit accept, and let's go ahead and just bring something up here. So bring a window up, we'll go into here, and I will go to my rigging, and you'll see now I have this rigging folder, right? Now I really want to have these files inside the rigging folder, so I'm just going to drag those right inside there. So now that I have my rigging folder, I've got all these files, and if I'm in Houdini, let me go ahead and save this one more time. I'm going to save it in the right spot inside of here and save it over that. Say accept. It's going to say, do you want to overwrite? Don't ask me again. Overwrite. Okay, so if I'm in Houdini, now if I ever go like save as, and I say $hip, this expression here is going to go to the folder. The HIP is going to go to the folder that you have the file saved into. And if you have a job as well, $job, then that will also go to here if you have your project set. So it should be both the same. But that way you could use this expression if you're like trying to save like renders out or something like that. $hip will tell it to go and look in this directory that the file was saved in. Okay, so now we have that set up. That's important. You're gonna go ahead and start just doing different things. So like obviously creating a node. We already did it once, but I'm gonna go ahead and hit tab on my keyboard, and you could just type in geo, like a geometry node. It's gonna be a very common thing that you create. Double click to get into it. That's one way to do it. I can right click and type in geo. I could also just go into here and look for it, but that's going to be cumbersome because let me show you this. This is like, there's tons of nodes in here and tons of different things you can do, and they're context specific. So if I go inside the geo node, now there's going to be even more. So look at that. So this is all these different nodes you can use in the geo node. It's incredibly complex. Don't let that intimidate you at all, because you know, you're only going to use what you need for a project. You know, a majority of these nodes I don't even touch for a lot of the things I do. So don't worry about learning all the nodes. Just go through projects and learn how to do stuff as you go along, and then you'll pick it up as you go. And let's see, what else should we talk about? Let's alter the interface a little bit. If you're working in like particles and such, a lot of times what people do is they'll come up to this little tiny white tab here, and don't be confused because there's one here too. These are actually different. And you click this little caret drop down, and I could say split pane left and right, or top and bottom, or you could tear off a pane copy. I'm gonna say top and bottom. And now obviously we have two scenes set up. I can go ahead and I could change this. Let's see here. I can set my view and say top view there, you know, if I wanted to. But what I usually do for this, if I'm, for instance, like I said, particles, is I'm going into inspectors and I'm doing a geometry spreadsheet. And in here, it'll show me all my attributes and stuff that I have on my particles, so I can like access them really, really fast. And I'll pull this thing down here so that if I ever need it, or you could just collapse it, it's right there just to pop it up. And this is the basic layout that I have for my initial Dan right here. And then if I wanted to save this off, all I have to do is say save current desktop as, and it'll ask me what I want to name it. Of course, I've already got one, so I'm just going to hit cancel. But you would just say save. Okay, so that's how you could save off different stuff. You also have different views here. You know, obviously 4 views. You can see right here that there is ways to navigate to this through hotkeys. And if you really wanted to, you could set hotkeys for other views if you wanted to. But this is a very common one. So you can see it's like Control 4. Control 1 will bring it back. So if I go Control 1, it goes back. Control 4, it goes to the 4 view. Okay, I don't really like that, like having to reach like that. But usually what I'm doing is I'm hitting space 2 goes to your top view. Space 3 goes to I think that's the, let's see, it says front view. Yeah, space 3 is front. Space 4 is right view. Space 5 is your UV view. So a lot of times I'm doing stuff like that. Now when it comes to UVs, I think they might have a UV tab here. No, they don't. So if it comes to UVs, like for instance, let's go ahead and make one of these. I'm going to go ahead and just minimize this. I'm going to go here and say split left and right, like so. And let's say this is what I want for my UV view, something like this. Then I would go up here and say build, save current desktop as, and then I would say UV. So now I can look at my UVs and work on them in the viewport at the same time, and you can see it's saved. And now let's just go back to where I was, which was the build. So it's still going to keep what I had done in the build in this current session, but it shouldn't be there in the next session. And I could go ahead and, like, let's say I'm done with this scene view, I could just close that, and then I'm back to where I was. Hit space 1, and now I'm back to my perspective view. Okay, so that's one way to navigate. And I don't want to go too far into the weeds and get into stuff that maybe you may never touch, but you know, obviously we're going to access a lot of things up in these two panels. These are more, I would say these are, you get your simulation, your lighting, rigid body stuff, you know, that's over here. And then a lot of your like building stuff, you know, if you're going to like add meshes in and stuff like that, you know, I can go ahead and just drag a sphere into here like so. And then now I have a sphere in the center of the world. Pretty simple. Now the way Houdini is different than a lot of other programs is like the sphere from the get-go will not give you UVs. And the reason why Side Effects does stuff like that, where they basically strip it down to just a surface at this point, or I should say just as a polygonal surface, I can turn it into a different kind of surface. Oh, I did this. Okay, so you have to go inside of it. Let me forget I did this sphere. I'm going to delete it. This is basically just a geometry node right here. Well, how I usually do this is I'll go into a geometry node and then drag a sphere in. Okay, and you'll see now I have different options there. Anyway, so Houdini doesn't put like UVs or normals, even though it shows it like it has normals. If I go ahead and show, like when I look at my normals here, which is this little tab right here, it does have vertex normals, but it doesn't have point normals. And that might sound kind of weird. Like, wait, what do you mean point versus vertex? Aren't they the same thing? In some other programs, yes, they're kind of considered the same thing. But in Houdini, a point is kind of what you would consider a vertex in Maya, whereas it sort of combines any vertices that are connected into one point. And typically, we're almost always working with points. So don't worry about like all this nomenclature just yet. We're typically just working in points. And so if I wanted to actually have normals on here, I can just click on this little tab here, drag out, hit tab on my keyboard, or right click, one of the two, and I could type in normals, and I could just pop a normal on there. And now if I flag this, so I haven't talked about flagging yet, but we'll get there. I'm going to flag this one and turn this off. And so right now, normals to vertices. Okay, so if I change this to normals to points, and then I show that, now you'll see they look different. Well, why do they look different? The points is like the combination of the vertices, basically. So maybe what's not apparent in 3D, and I'm sure that many of you watching this might already know this, but the vertices, like literally every face here has 4 vertices that make up the one face. The point is the combination at these intersections of those 4, so that you don't necessarily have to deal with the 4 vertices right there. You just deal with one, so it kind of like simplifies it. If you're in Maya, it kind of does it for you behind the scene, but if you ever are in Maya and you go into vertex faces, it shows you basically how the polygons are being broken up. Obviously these are different up here because there's only 3, so there's only going to be 3 vertices instead of 4, because there's our triangles up there. Okay, so let me turn that off. So you could see that there's different viewing options along here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just hide this. So that's your main extended grid, and then there's a working grid. So this is like a smaller working grid. So you could decide to use either. They both work, and there's ways to set these things up and change them and stuff like that. We don't need to get too much into that. What we should talk about is if you're going to create a camera, let's just do that really quick. I'm going to come back up, and wherever your view is, if you hold control and click this camera right here, it's the first thing, hold control, it'll set your camera up right to that whatever you were looking at, and you'll notice that there's a lock right here. And that lock means that wherever you actually rotate, the camera is actually rotating too. And it's also indicated by this red. That's showing you that your camera's locked right now. But if I unlock it and then I start to move, all of a sudden it just changes. It puts you right back into the perspective. So the camera is actually still there, obviously. There's the camera, but we're in perspective mode right now. So if I was to select camera here, camera, and then say lock, now I'll be moving the camera again. Okay, so that's good to know, definitely important. So we'll unlock and just move around. You can see now we've changed. All right, so you notice we have a camera here. What if we don't want to see that? We could just unflag it. So let's unflag it. Okay, so now we can't see it, but we still have it selected, so it's showing that it's sitting, you know, you have like the little tool here, the move tool, or this is like a universal transform tool that's sitting right in the spot where the camera's origin is. So so if you don't want to be on that, like obviously if I select the geo or I select off of both, you know, then you're not selecting the camera. Okay, so let's go from there. We're just going to travel down here a little bit. This is basically like your different kinds of lightings that you can get. You know, headlight only. So there's a bunch of different. I don't mess with that too much. It just depends on what I'm doing, but most of the time I don't. One thing you may end up using a lot is putting, like, so you could see the points better. So you could turn that on and off really quick. You have the normals, obviously. This is velocity. So this will show you, like, if you're doing stuff like a simulation and you need to see velocity happening, then this will show you velocity. And if I showed an example of that, I can just come into, where did I have my sphere? Have it in here. I'll put a translate, or transform, I should say. Transform into here. Every time you want to record a movement, you're going to do it in a transform. So in other words, I can animate on this, but the ball still has its original spot that it was put down is still there. This is actually the power of Houdini, is because this stuff is saved into the file, and it's just operationally built every time you open. And the beauty of it is if I screwed something up, or let's say I altered the sphere, the original sphere is still there, so you still can access the original thing that you did. Anyway, but let's go ahead and say, we'll just go like this, because we're going to look at like a velocity really quick. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop a key. So I'm going to say, I'm going to hold Alt and click into my X translate box right here, and you'll see it turns green, and then you'll see down here in the timeline there's a little green tick, and I'm going to move, I don't know, we'll move to 72, and then, you know, let's not do this too close because it's going to be super slow, and then I could just Alt click right there, and then of course, you know, you could see there's this going on. Now we would say, hey, we have velocity now, right? Well, not yet, because we haven't calculated it. Okay, so all we're calculating now is like position. We're just calculating the position of these points, and we do have normals. So we have two, those are actually attributes. So I don't want to get too, like I said, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but that's important to know. Like you have two attributes now. You have a position, which is always going to be P. Let me just put this right here. P equals position. This is like the shortened code name. Capital P is for position, and N equals normals. Okay, so, and usually when you're calling out to these later on, you're gonna put like at P, or this is when you're actually doing vex. If you ever get into vex, at N is gonna be normals. Okay, so we got that. Just so you understand, right now we're just working with normals that we have on here and position. By the way, if you just hover over here and you go to this eye and click on it, you'll see right here we have 2 point attributes: normals, which is a 3 float, in other words a vector, and you have position, which is also a 3 float, which is also a vector, because they have an x, y, and z coordinate, and the normals have an x, y, and z coordinate. Okay, so we move the thing. Let's get a velocity from this, which is another attribute. So we could hit tab and say, we'll put into this a trail. So a trail allows you to calculate, we'll just highlight this, we'll calculate the velocity, compute velocity. So now let's turn this on here for the interface. You can see these little ticks all of a sudden come up. Okay, and then zoom like that. Let's go here. Let's go back to the transform really quick. I'm going to hold Control and Shift and drag over this. I'm going to move this with my middle mouse over to 24. Okay, so now we have you see now the little lines are longer. So because it's moving faster, the velocity is faster. And remember we made that little geometry spreadsheet in here? Well, this geometry spreadsheet is going to show us all of our different attributes. So we have position, and we have normals. So this is for each point, it's showing you its position and its normals. Where is the velocity? Okay, let's select that. Okay, I didn't have it selected, so now you can see the velocity. There's the velocity popped up in there, and that's represented as v. So if you're ever doing code, which we aren't right now, but later, at v equals velocity. That's what we're going to get. Okay, so we've got that. Let me do one more thing here. I'm going to get to 48, and I'm going to come back to the transform, and I'll zero this out, and then hold Alt and click in the box again, and we're back there. So now, as we play this, you can see as it comes back, the velocity is going the other direction. Okay, normals are still the normals. They're going to still stick out like that. But the velocity's, you know, going the opposite way. That, well, it's really, the velocity is actually like kind of going in this direction, but it shows it like a trail going off in that direction, like goes to a point. So that's just how they show it, because it makes sense. Okay, so that's where we were, showing the velocity, showing the normals. Here's the point numbers. So we always could be able to look at the point numbers if we need to. Here's the primitive. This is the primitive normals. And primitive is kind of the same thing as saying a face or a polygon in other programs. But primitives, it'll either be like this, the drawing of the face here, or it can be an edge as well. So an edge is considered a primitive, and a face is considered a primitive. Okay, here's the primitive numbers. So each one has a number, so that, you know, if you needed to specifically call out, like you could call out and delete a section of primitives by number. So this is really easy to see that. Let's see, I think this is for curve handles or primitive hulls. Yeah, a lot of these I don't get into too much. The ones that are beyond here are maybe a little bit more advanced. You don't really need to see these right now, or see anything about them at this moment. But I think that's enough for that side. We should talk a little bit about stuff going on here. For instance, if you wanted to select, let's go down to the trail. Actually, let's actually go all the way up here. If I wanted to select a vert, or I will say a point, it's actually called a point, I would come in, I would actually hit this little arrow here, and then right now I have this point selection already set. So, oh, I'm sorry, it was primitive. This is the point selection. So I can click on that, and it'll tell me down here, like, I have 288 prims, 266 points, 1 point selected. I believe that is not there by default. So let me show you how that works. I'm going to hit D on my keyboard, and you have display, and I believe you have to go onto here to guides, and geometry information always on, and save as default. I always want that on, so I save that as default, and then close. So anyway, if I do that, you could see the 125 points selected, you know, whatever you want to grab. Okay, so that's how you grab points. If you're going to go ahead and move those, like for instance, I'm going to hit T on my keyboard, or I could hit the move button right here, which you can see is T. Of course, rotate is R, and scale is E. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit T. The moment I do that, it's going to add a node to my graph, because I'm going to be editing this. And so right away, Houdini is going to store anything I do. Like if I just move this out like this, it's going to store it within that node. Okay, so now I can go back to the point normals. Look at that. It's going to look a little weird, a little bit different, because I've just altered that. It's still going to have the same translation. It's still going to have similar trails, however they'll be in a different place. You know, they'll be off-centered because of what I pulled out. Okay, so that's, if you end up moving stuff around, it's going to keep storing it. Now I could do a bunch of tweaks within this one edit, and you know, like I could be moving stuff around all over the place. Now if I decided I didn't want that, this is what's beautiful about Houdini. Just delete it, and it's right back to where you were. Okay. So again, you could select edges or faces, and it's just an easy way to do that. So I believe if you want to do the keyboard shortcut, it's 2 for points, it's 3 for edges, and it's 4 for faces, and it's 1 for verts, I believe. Oh no, I'm sorry. 1 takes you to the object level. So scratch that. It's not 1 for verts. Okay, and we have a few other things, like I just showed the move, rotate, translate. This universal tool, you can click on that, and it's moving actually everything at this point. Let's see here. I guess that doesn't work for if you're gonna like move something individually. No, it goes right back to the object. Okay, so that, just so you know, that you have to use this move tool for that. I actually wasn't aware of that because I always use the hotkeys, so I wasn't sure how that worked. Okay, so the other thing is that, so you have snapping here. So you have like snap to grid, you have snap to curve, you have snap to points, and then this is, I actually have never used this one. Which one is this? So it looks like you can set this. You can set a lot of these if you click and hold, and you can set different options to it. But typically I'm using like snap to point or snap to grid. This general snap one, I want to see what the heading says. Snapping, right click options, multi-snapping. Okay, so you could set up multi-snapping with this one. All right, that makes sense. Okay, multi-snap options, bring that up, and then, set this up. I actually haven't used this before. I haven't had to for the stuff I do in Houdini. I usually do like my hard surface modeling in other programs, even though you can do it in here. I just typically do it in other programs, so I don't use it as much. Okay, and then you have other things like this one's important. This is the where is it? It's inspect. Oh no, it's down here. Sorry. This is a flipbook. So sometimes when you're doing a simulation, the viewport may run slower than it actually should be going. So you would do a flipbook, and if you're in Maya, this is the oh shoot, what's that thing called? Play Blast. That's it. Play Blast. Had to think about it for a second. This is like a Play Blast, and this one's to, I think this is for rendering, right? Yeah, to view mantra. Okay, so we're not going to get into rendering this time, but that's just some stuff there that to give you a little bit of important things that you might need. You have different editors here: animation editor, render editor, composite view. You can do full compositing in Houdini as well, which is interesting. And they even have the geometry spreadsheet here, which I don't really need because I make my own. What else can we go over that's probably important? Let's see here. So somehow I got my channels. All right, so let's go into here. One thing to note about moving these things around is I can hit Y, and you'll see you get a scissors, and I can just cut nodes off like that. You can restring them by going like that. Pretty simple. If you hit W on your keyboard, wireframe, hit it again, back to shaded. For a bunch of different shaded modes, you can go ahead and like go into solid. You can go into smooth shaded, so you don't get the edges. You can go into flat shaded, so it should be faceted. All these type of things. You go matte cap. Houdini has a pretty good viewport, so have fun with that. You can play around and see what the other things is that it does. One of the things that I sometimes do is, like, if I get a mess of nodes, like if I have something that's way off here and there's other nodes that are connected, sometimes I hit Alt and I drop like a point in here and I can rearrange. And this is just basically like giving me like some angular geometry, so I can like do it like that. There's another way that you can do like a rounded version. I don't remember how to do that, but I prefer this version. However, I see a lot of people use the other one. Let's see here. Okay, so we talked a little bit about flagging. Let's go back into that again. So obviously, if you click the blue on the right edge, that's the node that you're flagging. But if you notice, I still have my first node selected, so it's yellow around there. Okay, even though I'm flagged here, this is going to be the end result, and it's giving me kind of like this ghost look of the other one. That's something that Houdini does, because sometimes you need to work on this one but actually see over here. If you want to see both of them, you can hold control and let go, and strangely, oh, do I have wireframe on? No, I don't. Let's see here. Why is that not working right? That's weird. It should be working. There we go. Worked on that one. Huh. Weird. Let me, so there, if you just click this, it's a template view, and it'll just show like a wireframe. I'm going to click that off. If you hit it and hold control, it should be a smooth shaded, just like you have originally. And for some, oh, I know why it was showing it that way, because it was what I had selected. So for some reason, when I have it selected, it's actually not shading it. I don't remember doing that in the past, but today it is. Side effects has changed Houdini a lot in the last few years, so there are things that will change that I don't even realize that they've changed. So whatever. You'll come across that. Like if you watch old tutorials, you'll be like, wait a second, that's not how it works now. They've split nodes up and stuff like that, but it, you know, you kind of have to pain your way through it, and look up like what, you know, how do you do this node now, you know, in whatever version you're in, and then you'll find a forum, somebody will tell you, well, they split this node into 2 nodes or something like that. Anyway, so this is like a way to template, if you hold control, like I said, so you can still actually see it, but normally we're just doing like a template like that, and that means you can just see where it's at, you know. That's about it. Now you have another thing. Okay, so let's do a pass through. Okay, so if I watch this, so we have normals on this thing, right? But I'm going to turn off the normals here, and it's just going to let it bypass. And so now you won't see those. Only the vertex normals are still there, but you won't actually see the normals anymore because you bypassed it. You can see if you hold over, it says bypass. So that means it's just turning the node off, basically. You know, for instance, if I bypass this, then the animations are gone. We don't see the animations anymore. Okay, so we have other flags here. This is to lock, and that's about it. That's all you need to know. Around here, you can do some functions. Not to say that, you know, some of the functions like this just turns on the draw, some of it turns on the template, right? So you can turn those on and off. I don't typically, I usually just do it right here on the node, but this one I do use is the information, and sometimes I want to look and see like what attributes are on here. So for the first one, it just has position attributes because it's just got the points and their place in space, you know. And then of course you get to here, and then you've got the normals because that's creating the normal nodes, creating the normals, and then you can see the 2, and then of course in here this will still just be the same until we get to here, and we've made velocity, and now we have that velocity. I went over that before, but let me just explain the importance, because you might look at that and go, man, that's like, why is it so complicated? Well, it has to do with when you save out like really large simulations, like let's say you're doing some kind of huge particle simulation, every single attribute, like if it was like it is in some other programs where they just put tons of attributes on from the get-go on these things, every single one of those attributes actually is a data set. So when you save those particles off to disk, like if you're going to do renders and you need to cache those particles to disk because your RAM, you know, it's not like you have, you know, a bazillion gigs of RAM. So you save it off to your disk and it just renders it frame by frame by loading from disk. When you do that, the more attributes you have stored that you don't need makes those files longer to render or longer to load into Houdini and larger, and it just puts way more taxing on things and everything takes longer, and it might be too much for your computer to handle. So that's why we only keep, like when we're saving stuff to disk, if we cache out like a particle simulation, we only keep the attributes we need. So we want to get rid of all the attributes we don't need. And that's why Houdini does it this way, because it keeps it lightweight and you only put things on there that you really, really need. So it seems complicated, but if you get into this more, more advanced things than just like modeling, all of a sudden it becomes very apparent that that there's a reason why. And by the way, I'm a modeler by trade, so I'm not saying modeling is simple. I'm just saying, it's kind of a base thing versus like getting into like advanced, simulation stuff that you might blow up a model or something like that. So, well, I think that's enough for today as far as just how to create and navigate through Houdini. This will maybe give you a good jumping off point. So, all right, thanks for watching and have a great day.